There's a kind of person you meet in life who feels different, but you can't explain why. They laugh at things others would panic about. They stay calm in moments that should break them. They say it's fine even when nothing is fine. You might think they're just strong, emotionally mature, or simply unbothered. But the truth is far more complicated. These are the people who've endured more storms than most will ever see. And whether they admit it or not, their psychology operates on a level most people never reach, even though they never asked to. You know that person who jokes about their pain before anyone else can mention it? The one who makes everyone laugh when the room feels heavy. That's not just humor, that's a shield. A shield built out of necessity, sharpened over years of carrying nobody knew they were carrying. When someone survives too much, they don't just adapt, their entire nervous system recalibrates itself. They notice the things others overlook: a slight pause, a delayed text, the tension behind a smile. They read emotional energy the way meteorologists read weather patterns, instantly, instinctively, accurately. But here's something people never say out loud. The strongest people are often the ones who have suffered quietly the longest. And what looks like strength on the outside is usually self-protection on the inside. There's always a moment, a very specific moment that survivors experience. It doesn't come with shouting or tears. It doesn't happen during the worst crisis. It happens much later, alone, when everything is finally still. Maybe it's 2 a.m. Maybe it's in a car parked someone's house. Maybe it's while washing dishes. It's the moment the body whispers, "I can't keep holding all of this." Not dramatically, not loudly, quietly, almost gently, as if the mind itself is tired of pretending to be unbreakable. People who haven't carried too much will never recognize this moment, but those who have, they know exactly what I'm talking about. The collapse is never loud, it's never chaotic, it's a soft internal folding, like a bridge finally carrying 1 pound more than it was designed to hold. And somewhere inside that collapse is the truth. Surviving has become a full-time job. This is where the psychology gets interesting. To the outside world, these people seem calm, stoic, wise, mature. But what people are seeing is not calm, it's emotional numbness. The nervous system has been overwhelmed for so long that it doesn't explode anymore. It shuts down. It enters survival mode. It lowers emotional volume not because it wants peace, but because it can't handle more pain. And so the world becomes muted. Joy feels distant, excitement feels unfamiliar, even fear becomes quiet. Reactions become soft, delayed, almost detached, not because the person doesn't care, but because caring has become exhausting. Here's the paradox. People admire this version of them. They admire the quiet, patient, steady presence, but they don't realize that this version of them was shaped by experiences that were anything but gentle. Some people grow into empathy, others are forced into it. Imagine growing up in an environment full of unpredictability, emotionally unstable parents, volatile relationships, sudden changes in tone, inconsistent affection. A child's brain learns one thing before everything else: stay alert, watch closely, read the room, predict everything, analyze everyone, because safety depends on it. This creates a unique psychological blueprint. The amygdala becomes hyperactive, constantly scanning for danger. The prefrontal cortex responsible for logic is forced to suppress panic daily, and the nervous system starts operating at a level of awareness that becomes instinct. To others, it looks like intuition, but in reality, it's survival training. A child shouldn't have to study emotional danger the way someone studies for an exam, but many do, and that training follows them into adulthood. This is why people who've been through too much can read silence, not just hear it, read it. They can tell the difference between a tired silence and a disappointed silence, a silence filled with resentment and one filled with sadness. They can feel emotional temperature changes the way others feel a breeze on their skin. Most people enter a room and see furniture. Survivors enter a room and see emotional climate. They shrink themselves when needed. They soften their tone instinctively. They adjust their presence based on who is around, not because they want to, but because it's what kept them safe. These are not personality traits, they are adaptations, sculpted slowly, invisibly, painfully. And then there's love, the most complicated battlefield for people who have endured too much. Love for them is never simple. It's not just romance, it's vulnerability, trust, risk. Their heart remembers everything it had to survive, so even when someone loves them gently, the nervous system doesn't relax, it braces, waiting for the shift, waiting for the disappointment, waiting for the moment something changes. Some become avoidant. They love deeply but distance themselves because closeness feels like danger. They're the ones who say, "I'm fine," when they're not, who disappear when they feel too much, who care silently but fear expressing anything. Others become anxious. They fear abandonment even in steady relationships. A delayed reply feels like rejection. A change in tone feels like a warning. They overthink the good moments and rehearse the bad ones before they even happen. And then there are those with disorganized attachment, wanting closeness deeply but panicking when they receive it. They crave affection but flinch at it. They lean in and pull away in the same breath. This isn't confusion. This is trauma rewritten as instinct. There's also a specific kind of grief these people carry, not grief for someone else, grief for themselves, the version of themselves that existed before the storms, the version that laughed freely, trusted easily, loved without fear, slept without anxiety, the version of themselves that never constantly watched for danger. They miss a self they barely remember, a self they never got to fully be. How do you explain to someone that you're homesick for a version of yourself that never got the chance to grow? How do you explain the ache of losing a childhood you were too busy surviving to actually experience? But here's the beautiful twist. The people who have gone through too much are also the ones who experience post-traumatic growth, a deep shift in priorities, values, and perspective. They become more grateful for ordinary moments. A sunset makes them emotional. A small act of kindness feels monumental. Peace becomes sacred. Safe people become precious. Their heart becomes softer, not harder. Their empathy becomes sharper. Their compassion becomes deeper. Because once you've known darkness, you recognize the privilege of light. These are the people who show up for others when no one else does. They know what it feels like to cry alone at night, so they refuse to let others feel that way. They remember what silence felt like, so they speak gently. They know what pain tastes like, so they don't serve it to others. And yet they still struggle with control. They micromanage the smallest things while staying weirdly calm about the big things. Choosing a coffee mug stresses them out, but losing a job doesn't, because they learned early on that the big things in life are often out of their hands, but the small things they can control. They live in contrasts, strong but fragile, guarded but generous, hopeful but realistic, numb but deeply emotional. They've learned that two truths can exist at once, that life can be brutal and beautiful at the same time, that healing doesn't always look like progress. Sometimes healing looks like rest. Sometimes it looks like distance. Sometimes it looks like falling apart quietly so you can rise again later. One of the most misunderstood aspects of their psychology is emotional exhaustion. It doesn't come with loud breakdowns or dramatic collapses. It comes in the form of gentle fading. They don't leave suddenly, they drift. Their messages become shorter, their voice becomes softer, their laughter becomes rare. They start avoiding things that once excited them, not because they don't care, but because caring has become too heavy. They're not giving up, they're conserving energy, they're protecting the little strength they have left. And when someone asks if they're okay, they say, "I'm fine," not because it's true, but because explaining the weight would require energy they no longer have. This exhaustion is not weakness, it's the nervous system shutting down to survive, again. But here's the miracle. Despite everything, these people continue to hope, they continue to love, they continue to show up for others, they continue to rebuild themselves even when they have no blueprint left.
They go through hell and somehow come back kinder, softer, deeper. They walk through storms and become lighthouses, not because their life was gentle, but because they learned how to stand tall in weather that would have shattered others. A lighthouse doesn't shine because it's perfect. It shines because it remembers the darkness. So the next time you meet someone who seems too calm, too sarcastic, too emotionally aware, too good at reading you, remember, they didn't learn these things from books. They learned them from surviving. Their psychology is not a mystery. It's a map of everything they had to overcome. And somehow, after everything, they're still here, still trying, still hoping. That's not just survival. That's something extraordinary. That's art. That's poetry. That's human resilience at its purest. If this spoke